Have you ever stood at your own child's wedding, heart swelling with joy, only to overhear words that made your soul freeze? Words that threatened to shatter not only your child's future, but also everything you had sacrificed for as a parent? My name is Margaret, I am 72 years old, and I thought I had already endured life's hardest storms. I buried my husband after 45 years of marriage, learned to live with arthritis that stiffened my once steady hands, and moved out of the family home into a modest apartment when I could no longer manage the upkeep. I believed that the worst pain was behind me. But nothing prepared me for the moment when, just minutes before my daughter's wedding, I heard my soon-to-be son-in-law whisper words so chilling they pierced me more deeply than any physical pain. "She'll regret ever coming." That morning had begun like something out of a dream. The Fairmont Hotel was alive with joy. Bridesmaids in gowns the color of soft rose, stylists fussing over hair and veils, photographers eager to capture every second. My daughter, Victoria, was radiant in her silk robe, her face glowing with the excitement of a bride about to begin a new chapter. At 38, she had been through enough heartbreak to deserve happiness at last. I sat quietly in the corner of the bridal suite, fastening the same pearl necklace I had worn on my own wedding day decades ago. My fingers trembled, not from nerves but from the arthritis that has become my daily companion. I didn't complain. Today wasn't about my pain. It was about Victoria. She was strong, independent, and successful. She had built her life back after divorce, and now she was about to marry the man she believed was her soulmate. I wanted to feel only joy for her. I wanted to silence the loneliness that had settled over me since my husband's passing and bask in the beauty of seeing my daughter so happy. But as the music drifted through the suite and laughter bounced off the walls, my heart carried the weight of the words I had overheard in the corridor. "She'll regret ever coming." The man who spoke those words was the same man waiting to place a ring on my daughter's finger. The man she trusted with her life. The man she believed loved her unconditionally. In that instant, I knew this wedding was not what it seemed. A storm was brewing, one that could strip my daughter of more than just her joy. It could cost her everything. And I, a woman in her 70s with aching joints and a broken heart, was the only one who had heard the truth. What could I do? Would anyone believe me? Or would they dismiss me as an old woman overcome by nerves? Before I take you further into this story, I'd like to pause for a moment. If you're watching this now, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you're watching from. We love knowing where our family of listeners is gathered, because this channel isn't just about stories, it's about connection. And now let me do something special for you. You may be listening from a quiet home, from a hospital bed, from a nursing facility, or maybe just in the middle of a restless night. Wherever you are, I want to pray for you. May your days be filled with strength, even when your body feels tired. May loneliness never weigh so heavily on you that you forget your worth. May widows, mothers, and grandmothers in their 60s, 70s, and 80s be reminded that their voices still carry power, that their wisdom still matters, and that their presence is still a blessing to this world. And may those who feel forgotten find comfort in knowing that they are not invisible and never will be in the eyes of God. Now, let me take you into the moment where everything I believed about this wedding and about the man my daughter was about to marry began to crumble. The morning sunlight slipped through the tall hotel windows, falling across the suite where my daughter prepared for the day she had dreamed of since childhood. Victoria stood before the mirror, adjusting her earrings with the care of a woman who knew this was her moment to shine. Her dark hair had been swept up elegantly, and the diamond studs she wore had once belonged to my mother. It felt like 3 generations were present in that room, even though only 2 of us were alive to see it. At 72, I had thought myself hardened to life's cruelties. Losing my husband had left a wound that never truly healed. Living alone, depending on a cane to ease my steps, managing the pain of joints that no longer obeyed me, these had become my reality. Yet none of that compared to the wave of emotion that hit me as I watched Victoria smile at her reflection. "You look like a queen," I whispered, my voice breaking despite my best efforts to stay calm. She turned, her silk robe brushing the floor, and wrapped her arms around me. "And you, Mom, you look beautiful too." She fastened the clasp of my necklace when my hands failed me, her own touch gentle and steady. That necklace carried my entire married life within it. I had worn it the day I said I do, The day I buried my husband, and now here it was again, resting against my throat on my daughter's wedding day. It was as though time itself had circled back. But even in that tender moment, shadows crept in. The wedding coordinator, Patricia, a brisk woman with sharp eyes and sharper words, clapped her hands and ordered everyone to keep moving. When she spoke to me, it was as if I were a child who needed managing. "Mrs. Thornfield, could you wait outside while we get Victoria into her gown?" she said, not even looking me in the eye. I smiled politely, though inside I burned. I was the mother of the bride, not some stranger lingering in the wrong room. Yet in that suite, with its endless chatter and rushing attendants, I felt invisible. I obeyed, stepping into the hallway with my cane tapping softly against the marble floor. The hotel was buzzing with life, but out here, the air felt heavier. My hip ached, though I said nothing. This was Victoria's day, and my discomfort didn't matter. What did matter was the sound I heard just moments later, the voice of my soon-to-be son-in-law, carried from a shadowed corner near the service elevator. At first, I only paused because I recognized his voice. Marcus had that smooth baritone that carried easily, the kind of voice that made people lean in with trust. But what I heard next made my chest tighten until I could hardly breathe. "Told you this would all work out perfectly," Marcus said. "The old bat has no idea what's coming." Old bat. He was speaking about me. My grip tightened around my cane, and I pressed myself against the wall, hidden by a large flower arrangement. My heart hammered against my ribs as another man's voice, higher-pitched, with a faint Boston accent, replied, "Are you sure she bought the whole story about your import business going under?" Marcus chuckled, but the sound was cruel, stripped of the warmth I had always heard when he was around Victoria. "Hook, line, and sinker, Danny. She handed me $80,000 from her inheritance without blinking. Said she believed in our future together." My knees nearly buckled. Victoria's inheritance. The very money she had received after her father died. She had never told me she gave it to Marcus. Danny pressed further. "What about the old lady? Margaret?" Marcus sneered. "I've already convinced Victoria that her mother would be safer in a nursing home. Once she signs the papers, we'll have control of the apartment and all her assets. That's another 200 grand easy." I clutched my cane like a lifeline, my world tilting. My apartment, the last piece of independence I had left, was nothing more than loot to him. "And if she resists?" Danny asked. Marcus's voice hardened. "State nursing homes are full of accidents. A woman her age wouldn't last a year. By the time it's over, Victoria and I will walk away with $500,000. The words hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't just planning to rob me. He was planning to erase me. For a moment, the hallway spun. I thought my body might give out right there, but fury steadied me. I understood now. His charm, his attentiveness, his gentle suggestions about my forgetfulness. They were never kind. They were weapons, laid carefully to make me seem weak. And in that moment, I knew. If I tried to run to Victoria with this, she wouldn't believe me. Marcus had laid the groundwork too well. I stayed hidden until Marcus and Danny's footsteps faded down the corridor. Only then did I allow myself to breathe, though each breath came shallow and ragged. My cane shook in my hand, and I leaned hard against the wall, trying to steady my trembling legs. How could this be happening? My daughter was minutes away from marrying a man who had already stolen her savings, who had plans to strip me of everything I owned, and who spoke of my death as though it were a minor inconvenience. For a moment, I considered storming back into the bridal suite and telling Victoria everything. But I stopped myself. Marcus had been clever, far too clever. Over the past months, he had made a point of correcting me when I repeated myself, sighing when I misplaced my keys, gently warning Victoria that perhaps her mother's mind was not as sharp as it once was. At the time, I had brushed it off as concern. Now I saw the truth. He had been laying the foundation to discredit me. If I burst in now, shaken and hysterical, would Victoria believe me? Or would Marcus simply put his arm around her, soothe her nerves, and whisper that her poor mother was under too much stress? He had turned suspicion into his shield, and I was the target. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes, but I forced them back. This was not the time for weakness. I thought of all I had endured in 72 years: childbirth, financial struggles, the death of my husband, the long nights of loneliness that followed. I had survived cancer, buried friends, and watched the world change in ways I never imagined. Through it all, I had never surrendered. Why should I start now? Slowly, painfully, I straightened my back. Marcus had underestimated me. He saw only a frail widow with aching joints, an obstacle in his way. But inside me lived a woman who had fought for her family her entire life. That woman had not disappeared. She had only been quiet, waiting for the moment she was needed again. And she was needed now. I steadied myself in the corridor, letting the echoes of Marcus's words harden into fuel. My body might be old, my hands unsteady, but my mind, my will, remained sharp. He thought he had already won. He thought I was too fragile, too easily dismissed. That arrogance would be his undoing. I made my way back toward the bridal suite, careful not to betray the storm that raged inside me. When I opened the door, Victoria was stepping into her gown, her bridesmaids fussing with lace and buttons. She caught sight of me and smiled, unaware of the secret I carried. Her happiness was like sunlight, and I silently promised myself that no one, not Marcus, not his partner, not anyone, would be allowed to take that away from her. But as I watched her laugh with her friends, I also knew I could not simply shout the truth. Marcus had carefully poisoned her trust in me. To save her, I would need more than accusations. I would need proof. For the first time in months, I felt something awaken inside me. It was the same determination that had carried me through raising a family, through long hospital nights with my husband, through all the battles of age. This was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of my fight. I lowered myself into a chair, adjusting the pearls at my neck as if nothing had happened, and whispered a vow only I could hear. You will not win, Marcus. You will not take my daughter from me. And you will not bury me before my time. My heart pounded with fear, yes, but also with strength I thought I had lost. The wedding might proceed, but I would not stand by helplessly. I would find a way to expose him, to protect Victoria, and to reclaim the dignity he had tried to strip from me. Now, let me ask you, has anyone ever underestimated you because of your age or condition? Has someone ever mistaken your silence for weakness? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your voice matters here. When I returned to the bridal suite, I forced my face into calmness. Though inside I was shaking, Victoria stood in front of the mirror, now dressed in her gown, glowing as though nothing in the world could touch her. My heart ached with pride and dread all at once. There you are, Mom, she said with a laugh. I was wondering where you'd gone. Just needed a little fresh air, I answered, steadying my voice. She didn't need to see the storm inside me. She needed her mother to be steady, not fearful. The ceremony began soon after. Guests filled the chapel, music rose from the organ, and I took my seat in the front row, clutching my cane. Marcus stood tall at the altar, every inch the perfect groom in his tailored suit. No one around me suspected the truth. They saw only charm and poise, while I saw a man who had planned to rob us of everything. When Victoria walked down the aisle, all eyes followed her with admiration. I wanted to cry with joy for her, but every step she took toward Marcus felt like a step toward danger. My hands trembled, and I squeezed them together in my lap to keep still. The vows passed in a blur. I heard words of devotion and promises of forever, but I knew they were empty. I kept silent. To stand and object would have only confirmed Marcus's story that I was confused, unstable, no longer myself. So I sat there, lips pressed tight, waiting for my moment. It wasn't until the reception that I saw an opportunity. The ballroom filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and cheerful conversation. I spotted David Chen across the room, Victoria's colleague, a man in his 30s who had always treated me with kindness. He worked with her at the marketing firm and had attended many family dinners. What I remembered most was how he once asked quietly, "Are you sure about Marcus?" His tone then had been cautious, but it lingered with me now. I approached him as guests mingled near the hors d'oeuvres table. "David," I said softly, "may I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course, Mrs. Thornfield," he replied warmly. "You look wonderful today." "Thank you," I whispered, lowering my voice. "But I need your help. It's about Marcus." His smile faded. He leaned closer. I've always had my doubts about him. Tell me. In hushed tones, I explained everything I had overheard. The $80,000, the false stories about his failing business, his plan to place me in a home and take control of my apartment. As I spoke, David's face grew pale. Good Lord, he muttered. That explains so much. I tried looking into his company once. Couldn't find anything real. His background was patchy too. Hope flickered inside me. I wasn't alone anymore. Will you help me? I asked, clutching his sleeve with trembling fingers. Without hesitation, David nodded. Absolutely. Victoria is like family to me. If he's deceiving her, we need to stop him. We slipped into a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from the music and chatter. David opened his laptop, his fingers moving quickly across the keys. Let's start simple, he said. If Marcus really runs an import business, there should be records. Registrations, licenses, something. I nodded, though my stomach tightened. Each second felt heavy. What if Marcus noticed us? What if he guessed what we were doing? David frowned as he scrolled. Nothing. Not a single business in Massachusetts listed under his name. No Wellington Import Holdings. No trade filings. It's like the company doesn't exist. I clenched my cane. But he told Victoria he had clients overseas. That he was expanding. Then where are the contracts? David replied. Every legitimate business leaves a trail. He doesn't have one. He searched social media next. This is strange. His profiles look polished, but they only go back about 2 years. No older posts. No family connections. No history beyond that. 2 years. I whispered. You mean he appeared out of nowhere? Exactly. It looks staged, like someone created a new identity. My throat tightened. The man my daughter had married might not even be Marcus Wellington at all. David tapped his screen. Let's check public records. His face grew more serious with each click. No property in his name. No vehicles registered. No consistent address history. He's been using hotels and short-term rentals. That's common for people who don't want to leave traces. My chest felt hollow. So he has nothing real? No roots. Exactly, David said. And that makes him dangerous. We kept searching until the walls seemed to close in around me. I excused myself, heading to the ladies' room, where I steadied my shaking hands under cool water. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My pearls gleamed at my neck, but the woman staring back carried the weight of a terrible truth. Her daughter was in the grip of a man who had built his life on lies. I returned to David. There's more, I whispered. Marcus took money from Victoria. 80,000 from her inheritance. I don't know how many times since. Can we find proof? David hesitated. Do you have access to her accounts? She gave me her information last year, after I had a health scare. She wanted me to be able to manage things in case of emergency. Then let's use it, he said firmly. If he's moving her money, we'll see it. My fingers could barely manage the small keypad, so David guided me. Together, we opened her online banking. My heart nearly stopped. Transaction after transaction appeared. Large sums funneled into accounts tied to businesses with strange names: Wellington Import Holdings, MWR Consulting, Rodriguez International. David's jaw tightened. This isn't an accident. He's draining her dry, bit by bit. Over 100,000 already. I closed my eyes. My daughter's future, her savings, the fruit of her hard work, all siphoned away. And we were only just beginning to uncover the truth. David leaned closer, lowering his voice. Mrs. Thornfield, this is bigger than we thought. These accounts aren't just fake names. Look, Rodriguez International. That's not even connected to the Wellington name. Why would he funnel her money there unless he's used other identities? I finished, my pulse racing. David nodded. Exactly. And that means we're not just dealing with fraud. We could be looking at a man with a criminal history. Fear and anger churned inside me. If that's true, we can't keep this to ourselves. Who can we call? David thought for a moment, then pulled out his phone. I have contacts in law enforcement through our firm's security department. Let me try something. He stepped aside and dialed quickly, speaking in hushed tones. I sat rigid, watching Victoria laugh across the ballroom, oblivious to the nightmare building around her. Minutes later, David returned, his expression grave. I reached out to a contact in Arizona. They've been tracking a man named Marcus Rodriguez, also known as Michael Wellington, Mark Roberts, Martin Walsh. Multiple aliases. He's wanted for financial crimes involving elderly families. The room seemed to tilt. Rodriguez, I repeated slowly. That's the name on one of the accounts. David nodded. It matches. They believe he's been running this same scheme across several states, charming women, draining their finances, and isolating elderly relatives. And if you're right about what you heard, he's escalated to planning outright abandonment and neglect. That could be considered attempted murder. My hand trembled on my cane. So he's not just a liar. He's a predator. David's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, then whispered, "They're patching us through to someone higher, Detective Lisa Morrison. She's been on his trail for over a year." He handed me the phone. "Hello," I said, my voice wavering. "Mrs. Thornfield?" The woman's voice on the line was calm but firm. "This is Detective Morrison with the Phoenix Police Department. I understand you believe you've identified Marcus Rodriguez at your daughter's wedding." "Yes," I whispered. "He's here right now under the name Marcus Wellington. He's already taken my daughter's inheritance and is trying to take my home." "You need to stay calm," Morrison instructed. "We've been gathering evidence for 18 months, but without a clear identification, we couldn't move. If you're certain, this is the break we needed." I swallowed hard. He's already talking about placing me in a nursing home and selling my apartment. If Victoria signs anything, he'll control everything. Morrison's tone grew sharper. "Then you need to be careful. Rodriguez has a pattern of turning his victims into accomplices. He convinces them to sign documents, transfer funds, even open credit lines. Later, when the fraud is discovered, the women are left facing charges while he disappears with the money. If we don't act, your daughter could be accused of crimes she didn't commit." The words pierced me. Not only was Victoria in danger of losing her savings, her entire freedom could be at stake. I gripped the phone tighter. "What should I do?" "Don't confront him yet," Morrison said. "Keep him calm. Act as though nothing is wrong. We're dispatching officers to your location, but we need time to verify his identity." "Can you do that?" "Yes," I said firmly, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. "I'll keep him smiling. But please hurry." When I ended the call, my hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Yet I forced myself to smile as I walked back into the reception hall. Marcus was across the room, charming a group of guests with his easy laughter. He looked every inch the perfect husband, the perfect son-in-law. No one would have believed the venom I had heard in his voice an hour earlier. I reminded myself of Detective Morrison's words. Keep him calm. Keep him unsuspecting. If I faltered, everything could collapse. David rejoined me, his laptop open on a corner table. "I just got a confirmation," he said quietly. "The FBI flagged Marcus Rodriguez last year. He has pending warrants in Arizona and New Mexico. This wedding is happening at the worst possible time, but also the best, because he doesn't know we're on to him." I nodded, my throat dry. "We need more evidence. Something solid to hand the police when they arrive." David clicked through more screens. "Let's start with Victoria's accounts." Together, we traced transfer after transfer, large amounts vanishing into hollow companies. "It's a pattern," David said grimly. "He's taking just enough each time to avoid drawing the bank's attention. Over 118,000 already." I pressed my hand against my chest. The weight of it was crushing, but I couldn't let grief paralyze me. "What about credit cards?" I asked. David's fingers flew across the keys. "Yes, here. Multiple accounts opened in her name, but set up with email addresses she doesn't control. He's racked up about 75,000 in debt she doesn't even know exists." I closed my eyes. My daughter was being bled dry, and she was smiling in ignorance at the man doing it. David's voice broke into my thoughts. "We'll get him, Mrs. Thornfield. But you need to stay steady." Steady. That word echoed in me. It was the only way forward. As Marcus lifted a glass to toast the guests, his gaze swept over me. His smile widened, but I saw the steel behind it. He already suspected I was not as pliant as he hoped. If I showed my fear, he'd pounce. So I raised my own glass and nodded, my face a mask of warmth. Inside, though, I was praying for strength. When I opened my eyes again, I felt calmer. Marcus might have thought I was a frail obstacle, but I knew the truth. I was a mother armed with purpose, and I was no longer standing alone. The reception unfolded like a performance, with Marcus at the center of the stage. He glided between tables, shaking hands, charming guests, and laughing at every remark. People saw him as attentive and devoted, a man who had swept my daughter off her feet. They didn't see what I had heard in the hallway, that cold calculation, that greed. I sat at my table, Kane resting against my leg, forcing myself to smile whenever his eyes met mine. If I allowed my fury to show, he would know something was wrong. I needed him to believe I was harmless. When the waiters brought out champagne for the toasts, Marcus rose smoothly, raising his glass. His voice carried easily across the ballroom. "To my beautiful bride, Victoria," he began. "The light of my life, the woman who believed in me when I needed it most. And to my wonderful new mother-in-law, Margaret, who has welcomed me with such warmth and trust." He looked directly at me then, his eyes locking on mine. "Victoria and I have been talking about family responsibilities, and we both want to make sure Margaret has all the care and support she needs as she transitions into the next stage of her life." Guests smiled, some even nodding with approval. They thought his words were tender, generous. But I heard the threat underneath. "We'll put her away." I tightened my grip on the glass in my hand, willing myself not to react. When the applause faded, I rose slowly. My cane steadied me as I lifted my own glass. "Thank you, Marcus," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the room. "It means so much to have a son-in-law who cares so deeply about family, about honesty, about making sure no one is ever taken advantage of." For just a flicker of a moment, I saw his smile falter. Only I caught it, but it was enough. The game between us had begun. I lowered my glass and sat back down, my heart racing. David leaned toward me and whispered, "That was bold." "Sometimes bold is all we have left," I whispered back. The evening rolled on with music and dancing. Guests filled the floor, Victoria radiant in her gown as she swayed in Marcus's arms. To anyone watching, it was a picture of romance. To me, it was a nightmare, my daughter in the arms of a man who had already plotted her ruin. But I was not powerless anymore. I had allies. David had already gathered enough evidence to convince law enforcement. Detectives were waiting nearby, ready to act. The only missing piece was Marcus himself. He needed to reveal who he truly was, not just to me, but in front of Victoria and the guests. And so, as the dance ended and the crowd applauded, I rose from my chair. My cane tapped softly as I crossed the floor. "Marcus, dear," I said warmly, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Might I borrow you for a private word? There are some family documents I'd love to show you." His face paled for an instant before he recovered. "Of course, Margaret. Though perhaps another time would be more fitting." "Oh, I insist," I interrupted gently, squeezing his arm with more strength than he expected. After all, family should have no secrets. A murmur ran through the guests. Victoria frowned, clearly puzzled, but she followed as I led Marcus toward a side room the hotel staff had prepared for me. A dozen people trailed behind, curiosity pulling them along. Perfect. This was where the trap would spring. The side room was small but elegant, a private dining space set apart from the bustle of the ballroom. I had asked the hotel staff earlier to keep it available, not knowing exactly how I would use it, but now I understood. Marcus and I sat across from one another at a small table. David slipped in quietly, standing near the back with his phone in hand, ready to record. Several guests, including Victoria, gathered along the walls, their whispers blending into a low hum. I reached into my purse and withdrew a manila folder. Marcus's eyes flicked to it, sharp and wary. "What kind of documents?" he asked, his voice controlled but taut. I smiled sweetly. "Financial records, dear." I couldn't help but notice some curious activity involving my daughter's accounts. I spread the papers across the table, printouts David had prepared showing the large transfers to non-existent companies. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes widening as the numbers stared back at her. "Mom, what is this?" she asked, confusion etched across her face. "There's been some mistake," Marcus said quickly, his voice firm. "Victoria, those are business investments we discussed. Your mother must be confused." Confused. There it was again, the word he had used to undermine me for months. But tonight, it would not work. "Funny you should say that," I replied calmly. "Because I also called Wellington Import Holdings this afternoon. Do you know what they told me? That they don't exist. Neither does MWR Consulting. Nor Rodriguez International. Isn't that strange, Marcus?" The room went quiet. A few guests exchanged uneasy looks. Victoria's eyes darted between us, her breath coming faster. Marcus straightened in his chair, his mask slipping just a little. "These matters are complex, Margaret. Not something a woman your age could easily understand." The insult stung, but I refused to flinch. "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I understand that over $100,000 has vanished from my daughter's accounts. I understand that debt has been piled in her name without her knowledge. And I understand that you, Marcus, or should I call you Rodriguez, are not the man you pretend to be." Gasps rippled through the room. Victoria's chair scraped against the floor as she shot to her feet. "Marcus, what is she talking about? Tell me she's wrong." Marcus's jaw tightened. His gaze locked on me, cold and sharp. "You meddling old fool," he spat. "You should have stayed out of this." "Marcus." Victoria's voice cracked, horrified. "You don't understand," he snarled, ignoring her. "Do you have any idea how much planning this took? How perfectly it was working?" I leaned back slightly, my expression calm. "Why don't you tell us, Marcus? We're all listening." His chest rose and fell quickly, fury and arrogance spilling over. 3 years, he snapped. 3 years of finding the right targets. Lonely women, eager for love, with elderly relatives standing in their way. Your daughter was perfect, desperate for affection, guilty about leaving you alone. She handed me everything I needed on a silver platter. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes. The room erupted into shocked whispers, but I remained steady. Every word was being captured on David's phone, and Marcus, blinded by his own rage, didn't even realize it. Marcus began to pace, no longer the polished groom everyone thought he was. His voice grew louder, sharper, the words spilling out as though he could no longer control them. "She was easy," he ranted, pointing at Victoria as though she weren't standing there with tears streaming down her cheeks. "So eager to be loved again. She practically begged me to let her help when I told her about my business troubles. 80,000 just like that. Then more piece by piece. Credit cards, loans. She never even looked twice. That inheritance of hers? Gone." "Stop," Victoria whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. "Please stop." But he ignored her, turning his fury back on me. "And you," he hissed. "I had you right where I wanted you. The old lady with arthritis, stumbling around with your cane, repeating yourself like you couldn't keep a thought straight. I had her convinced you needed a nursing home. The power of attorney was next. Once she signed the papers, everything you owned would have been mine." "You monster," one of the guests shouted from the back, but Marcus only sneered. "The beauty of it," he continued, "is that no one ever suspects. Old people die in those homes all the time. Accidents, neglect. It happens every day. By the time you were gone, I'd have everything. $500,000, maybe more. And then we'd move on to the next city, the next woman. That's how it works." Victoria gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. Her knees buckled, and a bridesmaid rushed to steady her. She stared at him as though the man before her was a stranger, and he was. The man she thought she had married never existed. Marcus turned toward me again, his face twisted with rage. "But you ruined it, Margaret. You couldn't just stay out of the way. You had to pry, had to dig. Do you have any idea how close you came to destroying years of work?" I held his gaze, refusing to shrink back. "I didn't destroy your work, Marcus. You did that yourself. You were so arrogant you couldn't resist bragging. And every word you've just said has been recorded." His eyes flicked toward David, who calmly held up his phone. The color drained from Marcus's face. At that moment, the door opened, and Detective Morrison stepped in, flanked by two uniformed officers. The room fell silent as she held up her badge. "Marcus Rodriguez," she said firmly, "you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit murder." Gasps rippled through the guests. Victoria froze, staring as the officers moved forward. Marcus's bravado cracked. Panic replaced fury. "You can't prove murder," he shouted as the officers grabbed his arms. "I never touched her." "Planning to let someone die through deliberate neglect is still attempted murder," Morrison replied, her voice like steel. "And in Massachusetts, that carries heavy time." As they forced Marcus's hands behind his back, he spat words over his shoulder at me. "This isn't over, you old hack. Even if I rot in prison, your daughter will never recover. She's broke, she's humiliated, and everyone knows what a fool she was." I rose from my chair, Kane steadying me, and faced him directly. My voice was calm, but it carried across the room. "You were wrong about me, Marcus. You thought I was helpless. You thought age meant weakness. But you forgot one thing. Wisdom lasts longer than charm. And today, wisdom won." The officers pulled him toward the door. Victoria sobbed into her hands, the truth cutting deeper than any blade. The guests, stunned and murmuring, stood witness to the moment Marcus's mask finally shattered. As Marcus was dragged toward the doorway, he shouted one last desperate insult. "She's ruined. You hear me? Ruined. She'll never recover from this." I lifted my chin and answered clearly, "No, Marcus. That's where you're wrong again." The officers halted for a moment as I pulled another envelope from my purse. I held it up for all to see. "While you were busy stealing, I was busy preparing. You never cared to ask what my husband did for a living. He was a financial planner, and for 45 years, he taught me everything he knew. I learned to save, to invest, to build safeguards for my family. The modest apartment, the careful spending, you mistook it for poverty. It was a strategy." I opened the envelope and spread documents across the table. "This morning, I liquidated assets I had been holding for Victoria's future. Every dollar you stole has already been replaced. The credit cards have been canceled. The debts are being disputed with a top recovery attorney. My daughter's name will be cleared, and she will not lose a single cent to you." The room erupted into astonished whispers. Marcus went pale, his bravado collapsing into stunned silence. For once, he had nothing to say. "Your plan failed because you underestimated me," I continued, steady and calm. "You saw only an old woman with aching joints and fading strength. You never saw the mother who would fight until her last breath to protect her child. That was your mistake." Detective Morrison signaled to the officers, and they dragged Marcus out. His partner Danny, caught trying to slip away earlier, was already in custody. The door closed behind them, leaving the room hushed except for Victoria's sobs. I turned to her, opening my arms. She fell against me, clutching me like she had when she was a child. "Mom," she wept, "I didn't see it. I didn't see any of it. I thought he loved me. I thought." Her words dissolved into tears. I stroked her hair gently. "Sweetheart, don't blame yourself. He fooled everyone. But you're safe now, and that's all that matters." Guests stepped forward, offering comfort, shock still etched on their faces. Some murmured admiration, others disbelief, but all looked at me differently now. No longer invisible, no longer overlooked, I was the woman who had stood up and unmasked a predator at her own daughter's wedding. David slipped his phone into his pocket and gave me a nod. He had captured everything, and the evidence was ironclad. Victoria's reputation would not be tarnished. Instead, it was Marcus's life that had collapsed. As the crowd began to settle, I raised my voice one last time. "My friends, let this day be a reminder. Never underestimate the wisdom of age. Never mistake quiet strength for weakness. And never assume that an elder cannot fight for what is right." I looked directly into David's recording lens. If you believe no one should ever underestimate the wisdom of our elders, click that like button right now. Let the world see that we value the voices that others try to silence. A ripple of applause broke out, hesitant at first, then louder, carrying through the room. For the first time since that dreadful hallway encounter, I felt truly victorious. Not because I had humiliated Marcus, but because I had protected my daughter and reclaimed my dignity. The trap had sprung, and the hunter had been caught in his own snare. 6 months later, the world looked very different. I still lived in my little apartment, with its peeling wallpaper and creaky floors, but it no longer felt small or lonely. Each morning I awoke with purpose, with calls to answer, letters to respond to, and invitations waiting in my inbox. Victoria was thriving. My once broken daughter had transformed her pain into purpose. She had left her corporate job and now worked with a nonprofit that focused on protecting families from financial exploitation. She traveled to schools, churches, and senior centers, teaching people how to spot warning signs and protect their loved ones. Every time I saw her on stage, microphone in hand, her voice strong and clear, I felt my heart swell with pride. One afternoon, she came home from a conference glowing. "Mom, you won't believe this," she said. "They asked me to lead the state task force on elder protection." Me. Can you imagine? I hugged her tightly. I can imagine it very well. You were born for this. As for Marcus, well, Marcus was gone. He and Danny had faced the courts, and their string of aliases and false businesses had been laid bare. The evidence David and I helped gather had proven ironclad. The FBI presented bank records, testimony from other victims, and, of course, Marcus's own arrogant confession. He had been sentenced to nearly 30 years in federal prison, with no chance of early release. Danny received 15 years for his part. The money they stole was slowly being recovered, piece by piece. Banks were pressured to forgive fraudulent debt, and restitution funds were set up for the victims. Victoria regained her savings, her credit restored, her name cleared. More importantly, she regained her dignity. As for me, my quiet life was gone. I had become, somehow, a public figure. Newspapers called me the grandmother who fought back. Television shows introduced me as an advocate for the elderly. I gave speeches, stood behind podiums, and even sat down with senators discussing laws to strengthen protections against financial predators. At first, I thought I would collapse under the weight of it all. I was no politician, no celebrity. I was just Margaret Thornfield, a 72-year-old widow with aching joints. But when I stood before a room of strangers and saw heads nodding as I told our story, I realized I was speaking not just for myself, but for millions of others who had been silenced, ignored, or underestimated. One day after a television interview, David walked me to my car. "You were brilliant up there," he said. I shook my head. I was terrified. "Maybe," he said with a grin. "But courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about speaking anyway." I looked at him then, really looked at him, the warmth in his eyes, the steadiness of his presence. My heart fluttered in a way I hadn't felt in years. I quickly looked away, embarrassed. "You're blushing," he teased. "Don't be ridiculous," I muttered, but I knew I was. We had grown close, the three of us, Victoria, David, and me. We shared meals, planned events, even spent quiet evenings playing cards at my kitchen table. And though I told myself not to hope for more, some small part of me wondered if love could find a woman in her 70s after all. But whether or not romance ever blossomed, I had already gained something priceless: friendship, respect, and a renewed sense of life. Looking back, I sometimes shudder at how close we came to disaster. Had I not overheard Marcus that day, had I stayed silent out of fear of not being believed, everything could have been lost. My home, my daughter, perhaps even my life. Instead, I had discovered a strength I thought was long gone. And so, as I sit now by my window watching the evening sun fade, I feel nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for a daughter who found her purpose. Gratitude for friends who stood beside me. Gratitude for a chance, even in my later years, to live with courage and meaning. And before I close this story, I want to offer a blessing for you, the ones listening. May your later years not be years of loneliness, but years of power, wisdom, and joy. May your families honor and cherish you, not dismiss or diminish you. May your homes be safe from deceit, and your hearts be free from fear. May every wrinkle on your face be seen as a crown of honor, and every gray hair as a mark of strength. And may you never, ever forget that your story still matters, because wisdom does not fade with age. So, honey, if this story has touched your heart, if you believe in resilience, in justice, and in the strength of elders, then do one thing for me. Please subscribe to this channel for more stories of resilience, betrayal, and powerful life lessons, and share this video so others may learn from Margaret's strength. This was not the end of my story. It was only the beginning of a new chapter.